SBC Media.
Welcome to iGaming Daily, analysing the news from the betting and gaming industry all over the globe. Supported by SBC Summit Barcelona, the industry-leading conference bringing you the future of sports betting and iGaming.
SBC Summit Barcelona is the fastest growing sports betting and iGaming event in the industry, happening on the 19th to the 21st of September. Experience the entire global industry coverage under one roof, with 15,000 delegates, over 350 exhibitors, and so much more. Get your tickets now at sbcevents.com.
RTP, features, mechanics, volatility, and reels. These are some of the components of what make a basic slot title. However, the challenges that studios have faced in recent times are the ways in keeping slots varied and dynamic, while also innovating and pushing the boundaries forward. This will be a discussion at next week's SBC Summit Barcelona on the Casino and iGaming Innovation track on a panel session titled Keeping Slots Dynamic, Are Crash Games and Loot Boxes Influencing Slot Innovation? And joining me, James Ross, to go over this panel ourselves is CasinoBeats team with Craig Davies and Conor Porter. How are you both doing today? You okay?
I'm sat on the floor again doing a podcast. So I can't say I'm doing all right. No, this is becoming a horrible trend of these podcasts. Probably going to be sat on the floor again next week doing a podcast.
Well, I'll tease this now. SBC are in the process of building us a nice podcast studio. And
I'll probably be sat on the floor.
I just want to see you sat on the floor all the time, to be honest.
Yeah, will this podcast studio have chairs, by the way? Yeah.
They will do, but if your attitude keeps up this way, you will not be sitting on chairs.
Maybe a throne for James. And then...
The annoying thing is as well, this podcast, 2 days in a row now, has started with chairs as part of the introduction. Like, we need to start getting a bit more interesting in these podcast intros.
Well, at least it wasn't a 3-minute monologue like last week, you know.
That was a great monologue. Forget last week, forget yesterday's about chairs, and forget your chairs now. Sit on the floor, right? I don't care. We're going to be talking about this panel session, which is taking place on the Thursday, and it's an interesting one. And I think probably the best way of kind of starting this is just asking the question is, how do you think slot studios are kind of able to balance not only kind of what the player wants, but also kind of the innovation within the industry?
For me, there's a lot goes into the mix in bowl for this one. You've touched upon the basics, you could say, there, with what does the studio actually want to produce versus what does a player actually want to play. They're the basic principles, but you add into that, absolutely crucial is the operator in the entire process. What placement will a game get in an operator's lobby? How much prominence will it get? And how much does this hinge on innovative features, mechanics, whatever the makeup of a slot, a new feature, or kind of the development of a feature, you could say, versus are they going to a studio and saying, well, they're just playing 5x4 slots or megaway, so produce one of them.
Yeah, I think you've I hate this phrase, but I'm going to say it anyway. I think you've actually hit the nail on the head, because you really have. The operator, I think, dictates how far innovation currently goes with slot players, or with slot studios, sorry. And I'm aware the title for this session says, Are Crash Games and Loot Boxes Influencing Slot Innovation? I don't think that really should be the point of the discussion. I really think it should be, how influential are operators in this debate, and how lenient could they be in pushing forward and kind of experimenting more with some of these new titles that are coming out. I mean, we've seen it in the past, both of you on the CasinoBeats team as well. You've seen companies like EvoPlay, I know Vladimir speaking on this panel, Vladimir Malachi, yeah, that's the one, from EvoPlay. He was influential in creating Star Guardians, a fantastic slot, completely new, completely different, and took so much inspiration from video games.
Dungeon before that.
Dungeon before that, we
was
can't forget that
Dungeon
was
and Mortal Evil, I believe. That was the first, I believe they built it, the first RPG slot.
And these were truly different and innovative ways to move forward in slots and push the boundaries. Yet from a commercial side of things, you'd probably say it isn't a massive success. And they admitted themselves at the time. Vladimir just mentioned it to me and you, Craig, in a meeting. I think it was in 2021, I believe it was. They're not expecting commercial success from this.
Want to be the first.
Yeah, they just want us to be the first to do it.
That's a debate in itself, though. We talk about innovation all the time. How much do you want to be the first? Or do you want to be like the third or fourth and take a basic concept and do it a lot better? I mean, we probably don't have time to get into that, but that's a whole other debate right there.
I feel like that's a profit versus innovation kind of conversation, which it'd be good to get a supplier and an operator and even an aggregator on here just to kind of have that conversation, because it's an interesting one to have. But Conor, we'll come to you on this one, because let's look in the last 12 months. What have we seen which can be truly classed as innovative?
Well, I think it could just build upon what Craig said. How much innovation is there within the industry at the moment? Is it commonplace, or is it just a lot of people waiting for someone else to take that first step and take that chance, take that opportunity, and then build upon whatever ideas that they have in order to progress moving forward? You know, I've only been on the CasinoBeats team since near the beginning of the year, but constantly I hear Craig and Danny talk about Megaway slots and the success that they've had, and they've been around for much longer than a year, but it seems to be operators are more willing to take a chance on those innovative ideas that have appeared in the last 5 years or so, rather than anything that's new and upcoming in the last year. So it's kind of difficult to spot those slots. I mean, I don't know if Craig, yourself, you've seen anything particular.
I mean, one thing I would say is, do we kind of, as an industry, mislabel innovation in a way? Are we that obsessed with something entirely brand new that a development on something that's already in play, a development to make something a little bit different, a little bit better, pushing the boundaries a little bit, is innovative in of itself?
That old tale, is it innovation or is it improvement?
Exactly. I mean, could an improvement be classed as innovation? I mean, I'm sure if you was part of a studio who'd produce something along those lines, you'd be saying absolutely yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also for us as well to actually reevaluate what we think is innovative, because in my head, it's reaching this new ceiling, this new height, and it's a big leap forward from what you already have. Well, maybe it's not. Maybe innovation is the smaller things that keep building and building, and it is built on improvement that then creates a bigger product. It's a bit of a weird one.
The only one I suppose you could say a couple of things. I know the studios increasingly using AI. I'm sure I can do a couple, but I'm not going to name drop in case I'm wrong. And I'm going to very, very, very quickly brush over this, but multiplayer slots, there's an entire podcast last week on this, but multiplayer slots have come on leaps and bounds.
They have. I just want to touch back on something that Conor mentioned, and he mentioned Megaways, and I'm not going to discredit them, because Megaways has been a tremendous brand, and that's what we need to look at, brands. And I think your comment of operators are taking more of a chance with Megaways and kind of innovations within Megaways in their titles is because they have a strong brand behind them, a strong IP, and that's kind of, it's hit and miss sometimes. So only people who have the big time gaming IP can truly innovate and be seen. I don't think that's quite fair. I think this is where a brand like Megaways might stifle innovation a little bit, where some of the smaller suppliers, I mean, you've got Avatar UX who are doing their pop wins at the moment, and they're going down a similar route to Megaways. But the smaller studios who are truly innovating, and that's where a lot of innovation comes from, can't be seen unless they are tied into a licensing deal with big time gaming and Megaways. I don't think that's fair.
Yeah, and then building on that is what you said, basically. You can have the Megaways brand of slot and innovation within that slot, but it'll get hidden because Megaways is branded on top of it. So, there might be ideas within those slots that we've not really delved into and really thought about that have gone a little bit under the radar, but because it's got the Megaways brand attached to it, it kind of gets put into one basket, which is, bad on our part, but at the same time, it's once again an example of not really, from an operator perspective, not really pushing it out there and saying, hey, this is something that we've got different compared to all the other Megaway slots that are out there in the...
Someone had to take a punt on Megaways first. I mean, should an operator not be looking at this and thinking, that's just one mechanic? But you asked, like you say, you've correctly named Avatar UX. They're making great waves in the space. I'm not sure entirely how much Yggdrasil with their own set of game engagement mechanics. They sing them up like crazy. And you see a lot of slots, but again, I'm never going to have the data to look. But I'm not sure how well they do. We are seeing an increased focus on mechanics. So you'd like to think that the suppliers are getting the correct feedback from the operator to back up pushing down this route. That's the only thing I can base it on.
I'll finish off this point before we move on to AI, because you did mention this, but on the fact of branded mechanics, I think companies need to be a bit cautious. I know we've had the success with Megaways of that brand of elevating a company, but I would like to see probably less Megaways mechanics, less mechanics being branded in that way to be pushed. I'd rather we start getting more mechanics that truly do improve or innovate, if we were going off what we said last time, instead of just looking for an IP to push and brand out and then people license it. Yeah, like we see Megaways everywhere, and let's not have a repetition of this with everywhere we go. But on to AI, and we're going to briefly touch on this, and we won't go too far in depth, but what factor do you think AI will have on innovation? What impact? Because for me, I don't think, well, you could say artificial intelligence could create some form of innovation, but at the same time, you are limited on the data that you give it. So is it a case of using this data to speedline a process and to help studios give them more time to innovate? Or could we actually use AI to improve or innovate moving forward and create these new concepts?
I agree with that first point. I mean, I've said this on these podcasts before. I'm incredibly skeptical about new technology, and you can call me an old man as much as you want. I just am. I do think you've hit the nail on the head for me. Like I say, there are studios pushing with generative AI. I'd like to know what data is being fed into this and what the result is off the back of that. For me, if I was going to put it in a nutshell, we're just going to get more of the same.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Conor, I've said that the phrase "I've hit the nail on the head," or Craig hit the nail on the head. Craig said that I've hit the nail on the head. Do you want to say I've hit the nail on the head? So all three of us say it?
I think you hit the nail on the head, you know?
Yeah, there we go. For the listeners out there, we are going to ban that phrase moving forward.
Hey, I don't know. I did an opinion piece in the latest edition of SBC Leaders that was about 700 words long on innovation, and I used that word 14 times.
Really?
There you go.
No, there should be some words that are banned in this industry, and that'll be the episode of the next podcast where we list them all. But I'm going to jump on you actually, because you recently did an article that is on CasinoBeats, and it's with someone speaking on the panel. So can you just, one, let the listeners know who that interview was with, and kind of one of the key things that actually came from that, because you did talk about something quite interesting.
Yeah, so I spoke with Laura Petroska from Bet99, head of casino there. She's on this panel coming up. And we did this interview back in July, so I didn't want to go too much into the panel then and essentially put it all out on the table for everyone to read then. You know, I want to only ask a few questions about that panel on that day.
Tease it a little.
Yeah, teaser. That's a word I'm looking for there. And one of the questions I asked her basically was about what was the slot innovation that has caught her attention or has performed well for Bet99 over the last year. And she mentioned the cluster mechanic slots. And specifically, she mentioned about Sweet Bonanza from Pragmatic Play, which they've branded themselves as Bet99 Bonanza. She also mentioned Sugar Rush as well, and other cluster slots with like multipliers that have become player favorites for them. But she didn't necessarily say that it was innovation, but mainly that cluster mechanics are gaining popularity. So maybe in the future, similar to what we've been discussing with Megaways, maybe similar in the future, cluster mechanics could find that innovation in, you know, the next 12 months or so to bring something new to the table in the slotscape under the cluster mechanics feature.
Yeah, I mean, I've I remember when I first played a cluster game, and even I think last year at the CasinoBeats Awards, I think Relax Gaming's Temple Tumble was quite a decent success there. It was well praised. It is a good game, and I think the thing I'd like to factor in is like that style of game originated from a Candy Crush kind of era, and if you think back to when that was popular, it was quite a while ago, and it's taken a while to kind of transpire over to the iGaming scene.
Could even go even further back and maybe tie it into Bejeweled games. It's not like similar to like kind of that. 'Cause yeah, but it is very similar.
Proper throwback.
Yeah.
Yeah, for you listeners out there,
Throwing in my video game knowledge there for everyone to see. Yeah.
But these type of games, they were enjoyable, they were fun, and even though they didn't have elements of skill to them in the cluster mechanic style, the Candy Crush did, and I think that truly could be innovative. And it's the only slot which is different from a 5x3 reel or anything reel based, which truly has kind of hit off. I think it's actually more successful than we're making it out to be.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot more players out there who do like cluster slots.
Yeah. Plus, with those cluster slots, you have what mentions on the Sweet Bonanza one, particularly as it seems similar to Candy Crush. You have the extra symbols falling in tumble feature to continue the slot going forward, rather than just after one spin it's resetting, it cascading wins essentially.
Keeps the engagement and the kind of suspense on a slot title, which is, it's been one of the complaints where now, certainly in the UK market, you've got rid of auto spins. A game can be very boring if you just spin in and nothing else is happening. If you do one spin and 5 things could come from that one spin via the cluster and the tumbles and the avalanche spins, that to me screams innovation. And it's very simple innovation because it's not stand out in your face. It's very subtle, but at the moment, your player acquisition is probably going to go up. Your player retention is definitely going to go up. And the whole thing that studios need to keep in mind is you need the player experience at the forefront of your mind. And if a player is enjoying a slot a lot more, if it's a cluster slot, they're going to keep returning to these type of slots. So they're going to keep remembering, you produced a very great cluster slot. What else have you got? And I think these are one of the important things to factor in. And I think I'm happy she's mentioned cluster slots because I feel like that gets forgotten about quite a bit. So where do we go? Because we've got a few questions that we can't probably touch on. Okay, I think I want to address this one. And I think this might be a bit different to what's been spoken about before. It might not be spoken about on the panel, but I think it's an interesting question. Do we as a sector need to innovate kind of within slot mechanics and kind of gamification and features or so themselves? Or do we as the player need to reinvent how we see slots for them to evolve? And I'll explain a bit before you answer. My mindset in asking this question is, we always go on about innovation can be hindered because operators have a set criteria of what's successful, and players also have their comfort zones. They like to know a slot's a slot by how it looks. So do we need to change as a player how we look at a slot for it to be inventive, or do we need to continue looking into slot mechanics and gamification features to innovate?
It's a difficult answer. It's a difficult one to answer because it's always going to tie into player acquisition and player retention, especially from an operator perspective. As a player perspective, they are looking to get engaged with those games. So it can come down to like the IP of the game, what kind of brand it is. Is it a particular slot that they played before as well? And it actually touches on something that I brought up in previous podcasts with Craig and Danny about slot innovation. It's all about the balance between attention and innovation. The two can be opposites, but they also can be linked with one another. And I think ultimately when you're looking to bring slots that essentially you want to call innovative to the online casino space, they need to have that attention. And the easiest way for me to bring that attention is through recognizable IPs, and we talked about at the time, like the Peaky Blinders and Elvis Frog kind of recognizable IPs that go beyond what you usually see on an online casino. The more ingress with what the public would be able to recognize rather than just a frequent online casino player, which helps with obviously acquisition and things like that. So yeah, players want classics, players want innovation slots, you have to find the balance essentially between the two. There's no one or the other.
Balance is the key. And if you can add a third point into that. You can look at it from the operator perspective, the player perspective, and the supplier perspective. And you've probably got to try and find that magic middle ground. I mean, if you look at it from each, you can understand from an operator point of view, them having their data, this works. We might throw 1, 2 maybe innovative things on our lobby, but everything works. You can understand from a player perspective, I've got a spare 10 minutes here. I know Megaways, I'm going to try that. I know Relaxed Gaming, Push, I'm going to go with one of their slots. From a supplier point of view, I mean, I suppose it's just understanding that if there was a constant reinvention of the wheel in everything, that'd just be too much and it'd be ridiculous. But on the flip side of that, if you've got a supplier that's basically just reskinning the same concepts over and over again, they're the ones that are going to get left behind. So it's trying to find that magic balance for me.
Yeah. I mean, from the supplier point of view, you see a lot of, I'm not going to name them, you see a lot of suppliers out there who release a lot of content. And sometimes it's quantity over quality. But if you release a lot of content, something's going to stick.
There's different viewpoints to that. I mean, you're talking from a solely one supplier point of view. I mean, if you look at I name them a lot, but if you look at a Games Global that have got about 40 different studios under their umbrella, they've got a lot more scope for innovation.
Yeah, so money's a factor, innovation costs. And with that, some people might be too cautious. Some studios might be too cautious to think, we have an annual budget, we need to meet certain criteria. Would we rather innovate and create something that isn't going to be a commercial success like an Evo Player's done? Or do we want to just continue pushing out the same style things that we do and we'll have financial success down the line because we've produced so much content? I'm a strong believer that, yes, there's a balance. I actually think from a player's perspective who are comfortable, yes, it's their money that they're investing, but I think we need to educate them on different types of games, different types of slots, so that they're aware of what's out there, so they're not just creatures of comfort. And that's the one thing that humans are, we're creatures of comfort. Let's get us out of our box and just experience a few things. But I am going on, it's a balance, because then the operator needs to get a bit more braver.
Right back to what we said at the beginning. Yeah. The operator's massive in the whole process.
So the answer from this is everyone needs to be braver, maybe. I don't know. What I'll let the listener decide their key takeaway from this. We have run out of time. We're actually over time. Craig, Conor, thank you for talking about this today. Thank you for joining us. It's going to be an interesting topic, an interesting panel. I will leave I'll leave a link in the description, to the event. I'll also leave a link to Conor's article that he mentioned. And either of you two covering this panel, or is Danny Lee, your fellow colleague, covering the panel session?
No, I don't know what's happened on the day, but I will say I think you need to leave a cliche bingo card at the bottom of the podcast for that.
Okay.
People can tick along all the cliches that we said throughout the podcast.
We like a cliche. We like a cliche phrase. Right, I'm going to wrap it up. Craig, Conor, thank you for joining us. And to the listeners out there, thank you and goodbye.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of iGaming Daily, brought to you in conjunction with SBC Summit Barcelona, being held at the Fira Barcelona Montjuic on the 19th to the 21st of September. If you want to find out more about some of the subjects raised today, feel free to explore any of the sites in the SBC News Network or check out the latest edition of the SBC Leaders magazine. Happy reading.